Okay, welcome back to返學 DSE, and we are now in chapter 24. That is about body defense. So first of all, what is the defense mechanisms in our human body? There will be generally two types. That is the first one, non-specific defense mechanism, which include the physical and chemical barriers, phagocytosis, and also inflammatory response, because they can react to all kinds of infections. So we call them non-specific. For the second one is called the specific defense mechanism, which involve of the B cells and also T cells, because they are corresponding to a specific type of antigens. So we name them as specific defense mechanism, that they can respond to a particular type. Of course, there are so many types, but each of them can respond to a particular type. So for the non-specific defense mechanism, it provides an immediate defense against all types of pathogens. So it's very general. And for the first one is physical and chemical barriers. It prevents pathogens from entering as a first line of defense. So for the physical barriers, it includes the skin, inner walls of respiratory tract, and also the response of blood clotting. For the skin, it's layers of dead cell and it is tough and impermeable to waters and also physical infections. So it constantly shield off and replaced by new cells from underneath. So it prevents the pathogens from entering. And for the blood clot response, it is the blood platelets is responding. So in the cells at work, there's very cute kids and here, and their primary function is to convert the soluble protein, that is the fibrinogens, in plasma to insoluble fibers, which then trap the red blood cell and also the white blood cell. It prevents further bleeding because blood is a very important resource, and also it will prevent the enter of the pathogens. As for the inner wall of respiratory tract, the cells are closely packed so the pathogens cannot enter easily, and it also contains mucus-secreting cells which secrete mucus and trap the pathogens. And it also contains the ciliated epithelial cell, and the cilia will beat and sweep the mucus either upward, so it's coughed up, or downward, which is then swallowed into the stomach. And then we have to introduce the chemical barriers, which include the stomach, because the stomach contains the gastric juice. Other than the gastric juice, there are also tears, saliva, sebum, and also vaginal secretion. They all serve as a chemical barriers which kill or inhibit the pathogen's growth. For the tears and saliva, they contain the lysosome, which kills certain types of bacteria. And for the sebum, it contains the antiseptic ingredient, which is secreted by the cerebral gland, and they can kill bacteria also. And for the gastric juice, because of the hydrochloric acid nature, they can kill bacteria directly, and also because of the acidic nature, it will discourage the growth of some pathogens. And for the phagocytosis, which is also included in the non-specific defense mechanism, the phagocyte will move towards to the pathogens and then engulf them. The term engulf is very important, so make sure that you know how to spell it. And then the pathogens will be digested by the inside the phagocyte. If you want to know more, you can go to this YouTube and then have a look on how phagocytosis works. And sometimes we got wounds on our hands and there are inflammation. So what is actually an inflammation? So the damaged cell will release a chemical called histamine, and this is included in the cells as work black, which is the black version of the cells as work, which is also highly recommended to all the biology students. And it includes the arterioles dilation, permeability of capillaries increase, swelling of because of the accumulation of tissue fluid, and the phagocytosis start to engulf and digest the pathogens. So in simple Chinese, we call them four syndrome: 紅熱脹痛, 紅熱脹痛. You will have a redness because of the dilation of the arterioles, and you will feel warm or hot because of the increased blood flow, and then your wound will swollen because of the accumulation of tissue fluid, and because of the accumulation of tissue fluid, you will also have a feeling of pain because it will press a pressure against the nerves. So at the end of your inflammation, there may be a pus. If you want to know more about pus, go to cells of red black. So previously, we talked about the non-specific defense mechanism. Now we move to the specific defense mechanism, which involves a specific reaction towards an antigens of the pathogens, and it is all produced by lymphocyte. And for the antigens, it is a general term because even for your own cell, it contains antigens. We call them self-antigens. So they are membrane proteins on our own body cell. That's why in your previous chapter, we talked about some proteins appear on your membrane surface and they are for recognition. Similarly, for the foreign antigens, they are also present on the pathogens or on the toxins or even for the cancer cell. So if we are able to distinguish your self-antigens and foreign antigens, and then we can work on those foreign. So for the lymphocyte, they are specific for this function. And only one type of receptor will be present on its surface. For the B cell, they are found and mature in the bone marrow. Because of the bone, they call the B cell. And for the T cell, they are found in the bone marrow but mature in the thymus. So they are called the T cells. So for the lymphocyte, after maturation, the B cell and T cell will circulate in the blood or in the lymph or gather in the spleen or in the lymph node. That's why the lymph node has a function of filtering the blood. So let's talk about B cell first. So B cells have the complementary receptor which then bind to the antigen and become activated. Activated is a very important term and you have to include it in your answer. And for activated B cell, it will then divide it into two groups of cells. The division of the two groups, we call them differentiations. So they are either the memory B cell, which is for memorizing the antigens, and also for the plasma cell, is to produce the antibodies. So in cells of work, here is the plasma B cell. So this is the gun producing the antibodies, while this one is the memory B cell. So they work together. So what is actually an antibody? So antibodies is a Y-shaped protein with a specific binding. So how is this work? So there are some suggested functions. They may bind to the antigens to promote the lysis of the pathogens, or they clump the pathogens together. We call it agglutination and help the phagocytosis, or they will neutralize the toxin. So after all the B cell, let's talk about T cell. For the T cell, they have similar functions as the B cell in the recognition side. That is, the helper T cell will help to bind to the antigens with a complementary binding and become activated. And it will then secrete the lymphokines to activate the others. So you may think the helper T cell serves as a master control. And how this control works is because of the macrophage presenting some data to the helper T cell, and then the helper T cell will order the killer T cell to work. So this is the general working flowchart in cells of work and also in your own body. So there are two types as shown in the previous slide. They are the killer T cell and also the memory T cell. And also the term is differentiation. And for the B cell and T cell, they are specific, while for the phagocyte, they are still non-specific. So let's have a little break and clear about the relationship between the rebel cell, phagocyte, neutrophil, and also the phagocyte, macrophage, and how B cell and T cells work in similar and also in different. So let's have a break about this, and you may draw the relationship between these four terms. Okay, so let's move on. Let's have a look in these four. So in general, white blood cell describe all the things included, and there is a specific group called the phagocyte, and then phagocyte include the neutrophil and also the macrophage. So neutrophil is the 白血球哥哥, while the macrophage is the 女僕姐姐 in cells at work. So how body functions to it? Actually, they involve in two response. There's the primary response and also the secondary response. So the primary response is the first exposure of an antigen to our body. So usually it's very slow and you will become sick for the primary response. While for the secondary response, if the same type of antigens enter the body again, remember it's the same type of antigens. And you will have a shorter latent period, there is a shorter delay, and your body will have a quick production of antibodies, and probably you will be just fine. So here is a description of primary and also secondary response. So take time, label this diagram. Okay, the title of this diagram is actually about the antibodies level in your body towards two counters of the same antigens. Remember, same antigen is very important because if the antigen is different, there is no secondary response. There are always primary response. And then you can see that in the primary response, there is a longer latent period, and then you have a lower level of antibodies, and then gradually die off. And then in the second one, you have a shorter latent period, quicker production, and also the higher level of antibodies. So these are the three characters you should notice in this diagram. And this is the axis for time. So we rewrite these ideas into vaccinations. So what actually is a vaccine? So vaccine can either be one of these four. Okay, first one is lifted but weakened pathogens. Another one is kill the pathogens. Third is a subunit of pathogens, and also a inactivated toxins. So if you would like to learn more, go to this term and you may learn more about vaccine. That's called the vaccinology. And for the vaccines, you involve in the injection that is known as the primary response, and then you may produce some antibodies and some killer T cells, but most importantly is that you want some memory cell, because the goal is if the same antigens appear again, your memory cell will divide and differentiate into plasma cell, which means that there is a production of large amount of antibodies within a shorter period of time. And there is called the active immunities. Active means that the antibodies are produced by your own plasma cell. So it includes the vaccines that we just talked about. We call it as an artificial vaccine, artificial one, because we human that introduce the antibodies antigens to it. While there is a nature one, that is, if you encounter an infection, your body will still work in the same principle. So we have an exposure to the antigens, and you have a slower start, but it will last longer because it involves the production of the memory cell. There is another type, that is, the antibodies are transported from some other source. There is a natural way to acquire passive immunity, that is from the mother to your baby through the milk and also placenta. And also there is another type, artificial one, that is we inject antibodies to the patient directly. Because there is no exposure to the antigens, so there is a quick start because it doesn't produce any, it doesn't need time to produce antibodies. However, it will only have a very short-lived period because there is no production of memory cells. So after all this, you have to able to distinguish non-specific and also specific defense based on their types, example, whether they are inborn, acquired, and you have to distinguish whether the self and also the foreign antigens, and whether there is a memory that is produced, and whether it's adaptive or not, which means that can it be improved or not. So if you would really like to know more, I strongly recommend you to complete your reading of Cells of Work, and there is a short reading produced by the Science Focus 4-yin. It's a journal produced by HKUST, and there are both Chinese and also English version if you would like to know more about immunology and also blood. So here is an extract of the HAEAA document, and you have to know about non-specific defense mechanism, specific defense mechanism, primary and secondary response, and also active and passive immunities. So I hope after this video you will know more about your body defense and know more about how to preserve yourself better. So I hope to see you guys next time. Bye bye.